had the first debate of the U.S. Senate campaign this past week. We had announcements about how candidates were developing. We had big wins for Democratic socialists here in the Northeast. What does it mean in the Granite State, if anything? Let's turn to our rank pundits. Dr. Dante Scala is a super pointy-headed intellectual at the University of New Hampshire. Chuck McGee is the opposite of whatever that is in the real world of campaign work and marketing at Spectrum. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
Thank you, Michael.
So I want to start with the DSA stuff because I just find it fascinating. And does anything that happens in New York matter when it comes to how Democrats are going to pick their nominees in September here in New Hampshire? Let's start with you, Professor Scala.
Self-described socialists, right, according to my colleagues at the UNH Survey Center, make up about 1 out of 6 New Hampshire Democratic primary voters. So it's not nothing. If one person, whether it's, Heath Howard or someone else, can unite those voters and combine them with some progressives, because right now the Democratic Party, right, it's no longer the case that you can describe progressives as the left wing of the Democratic Party, because now there's a faction or a group to their left. And right. They've become, again, what happened in New York was important. That's become a reality. But, can those two factions here in New Hampshire get together and unite behind one single candidate among the several available in that New Hampshire 1 Democratic primary? That's the big question. But certainly I can imagine that people, again, to the left of the progressives, take a lot of heart out of what happened in New York. I really think that was a signal moment for that group within the Democratic Party.
Chuck McGee, are we going to see the kind of progressives to the left of progressives, as Dante says, winning primaries here in New Hampshire anytime soon?
I don't think so. I mean, listen, the crybaby generation is very wealthy. A lot of trust fund people, a lot of foreign born in that primary, 7% turnout. I mean, Mandami is really the de facto governor of New York State. I mean, he's calling the shots up in Albany. He's calling the shots in the city. And you have this young, militant group of people. That's just not where Hampshire is. I mean, certainly, as the professor points out, a percentage of that party, and the party is continually marching to the left. But even our Democrats have to work here in New Hampshire. So I think people who have invested in the system and want to see a better tomorrow, and not this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic march is just right. I think something we will reject in New Hampshire.
So the ideal here is if the two candidates who are really in the mainstream of the Democratic Party, based on people Democrats have already elected, right? Maura Sullivan, Stephanie Shaheen. Right. If the two of them at some point this summer get into a very negative back and forth, which turns off a lot of Democratic voters, then there's that possibility that someone to their left, whether it's Christian Urrutia, right, whether it's Carly Berryon, one of these candidates, right, could possibly pop at that point as a positive alternative to those two candidates. Because again, people in a party don't like when members of that party attack one another. That's true on both sides.
So what's hilarious to me is that your premise is that there's an actual campaign in the first CD and the candidates actually attack each other and draw differences and run. And I see no evidence that there will be any campaigning going on in the first congressional district on either side of the aisle. But let me get back to the DSA, because here's what jumped out at me, and Chuck actually kind of referenced it. How did these, I would argue fringe, maybe they're not, maybe, I'm getting it wrong, but whatever, these super progressive candidates win, including the ones who weren't supposed to? One of the people who lost was the chairman of the House Hispanic Caucus. He's like a super powerful guy. The polls showed that he was up solidly, and he still won. Well, he won with low income and voters of color, and he lost to the Starbucks drinking white rich women. New Hampshire's Democratic Party is basically the college educated, affluent, suburban white ladies club. So tell me, Chuck, why shouldn't?
Yeah, but they're not. But they're going to the Bedford. They're going to the Bedford Starbucks. They're going to the Amherst Starbucks.
Okay.
They're
Not going to Manhattan.
They're not filling out grad paper. They're not filling out grad paper papers and driving Ubers for at night for a living. You know, they're actually invested. They have children. They have real careers.
That's a good point.
You know, and listen, I tell my candidates all the time. Of course, you know, my candidates are Republicans, and I said, look, I understand it's very, very hard to run against free candy. Like when the other side's on the parade and they're just chucking out handfuls of candy, it sounds really good, right? And it's hard to run against that. And you combine that with, you know, with wipe Israel off the map and gas 6 million Jews, that, you know, they fires them up for some reason.
Dante Scala, on the issue of the first CD, I saw you kind of grimacing a little bit when I talked about the campaigning or lack thereof. I hear this from people all the time. When's this campaign going to start? When's this campaign start? And not just from Chuck McGee, who wants to be doing mailings, you know, and get the checks in the door. I'm talking about just people like me who like campaigns and want to see what's going on and hear the debates. Are we wrong? Is this normal, or is it weirdly quiet with 900 people running between the two parties in the first congressional district?
Well, I mean, I know that, you know, Maura Sullivan this week was, you know, her campaign was doing some kind of groundwork on the north side of Manchester this past week. I think I don't know that this is unusual. I think you see this, you know, kind of sleepy primary leading up to September over and over again, where we're all sitting around waiting for something to happen and getting impatient. And it all kind of comes to pass in the last, you know, the dog days of August. And this doesn't feel a whole lot more different than that. I think things will pick up as we head into August, into that, you know, Labor Day break. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if there's a different sort of cycle once we no longer have this primary in September. But you've got a bunch of candidates who are more concerned with the who's that test, passing that test, than going after anybody at this point, right? If you're Christian Urrutia, you're still working on the who's he test. And that's why you tend to be a bit more cautious, I think, with going after the front-running candidates, because you don't want your first impression on primary voters, your fellow partisans, to be a negative one. You'd much rather be positive. Let someone else do the attacking, right? It's necessary to do, but no one wants to be the first person to do that, especially if you're not very well known.
So Chuck McGee, is this normal from what we've seen in previous cycles?
I have to disagree with the professor a little bit, I think. I mean, listen, the first CD, and we can all delude ourselves that somebody besides Shaheen's going to win this thing, but she's just running out the clock, right? She's happy to do nothing and sit back and, you know, pretend and run a Biden campaign strategy from the basement. But she's just going to run out the clock, and she's in the driver's seat, and she's got 4 or 5 people or 3 or 4 people on her side that they're going to split up the anti-Shaheen vote. And
right.
You know, why somebody is not going to rail on her now? You know, I disagree with my friend and political guru Dave Carney. He likes to hold his cash until the end and then outspend their opponent. But I think it's a new world out there. I think primary voters particularly make up their minds very early. And if you don't come out and set the tone and make a name for yourself and go big, I think you got to go big early or go home. I mean, I think the clock is really running out on guys to pass the who's he test.
I want to push this back, because I think you're going where I'm thinking, and this relates to the debate that we had this week too between Sununu and Brown. I think you're looking at both parties, at Democrats who, if they're aware of the races at all, they're going, Chris Pappas for Senate? Sure, fine. And they've never heard of Karishma Manzoor, who was our guest on the podcast this week. They don't even know there's a race. Or if they do, they're like, this person seems great, she seems nice, but I got someone. On the Republican side, what's wrong with Johnny Sununu? I'm fine. What's wrong with Stephanie Shaheen? I'm fine. Now, for Republicans in this first CD, it's like, is there a race? I don't know anybody, because nobody has any name ID. And my point, Professor Scala, is this is the time to start people asking the question, here's why not. Stephanie Shaheen. Now you've got to get people thinking that there is a race. Otherwise, like Chuck says, he's just going to roll right in. And by the time people start thinking about it, it's like, oh, I thought we already decided. What's these at? What? There's 5,000 attack ads from 900 people. I don't know. I'm going to stick with Shaheen.
I'm still doubtful that you can put, where the position that John Sununu is in right now, which is a very good one. I would not put Stephanie Shaheen in that same position in that race. I think Morris Sullivan is in that spot where if New Hampshire Democrats, and I agree with Chuck, and New Hampshire Democrats are not, upper Manhattan, New York City Democrats, no doubt. But I do wonder a bit if you're a New Hampshire Democrat and you're looking for a change, but you're a New Hampshire Democrat, you don't want too much of a change. Morris Sullivan's kind of in a nice spot because in some ways she reminds you of all the other New Hampshire Democrats you've elected to office, including Chris Pappas, including Jean Shaheen, Maggie Hassan. She fits that mold pretty well, but she's a little different. And maybe Democrat, you see this across the nation. New Hampshire National Democrats are looking for something different. Incumbents are in trouble, right, in congressional primary after congressional primary. Stephanie Shaheen's not an incumbent. However, she does share a family name with one who's been one for decades now. So I do wonder a bit about that.
We have a filing period. We have a fundraising period that's coming to a close here in what?
Right.
4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the news after that fundraising period will tell us a lot about what's going to happen. I mean, yeah, well, Maura was up, $1 million in cash on hand over Stephanie, but she's going to need the entire $1 million.
Sure.
Just to match the name ID. And I just don't see how the anti-Shaheen vote or the progressive vote getting split up 3 or 4 ways is going to overcome the family name. I just can't. I have a hard time. I agree with the professor that Stephanie is not very dynamic. She's pretty reserved. She's stumbled on a number of questions about what she really believes in and where she stands. But at the end of the day, she's still got mommy and daddy to raise her some big cash when it counts. And if Maura's not making a move now, she's never going to catch up in August.
So I think the best example of the why not problem for the challengers of the frontrunners was on display at the debate this week. I was at the debate that the Republican Seacoast Republicans put together. Everything you've heard about the problems with the moderator and the tech, whatever, is all true. It was a train wreck. But in the end, it was 2 guys who've held office before. They know how to campaign, doing their thing. And the question that was before the Scott Brown and Johnny Sununu was, why not Johnny Sununu? Why not him? The crowd liked them both. And I hear this all the time. It's funny. Senator Kennedy from Louisiana was up doing an event for Johnny Sununu. And I talked to him, the 2 of us, and he said, I like Scott Brown. I love him. He's a great guy. But he's just, he's not the best candidate. And I have yet to see an argument that is having any impact, Professor Scala, on primary voters who generally like both. I mean, polls show Scott Brown has some more negatives, but it's not crazy negatives. They'd probably be okay either way. I haven't seen any. You see what I'm saying? And do you agree with me that that's the missing element is I got someone who seems to work. Why would I get rid of it if it's not broken?
I mean, I listened to both opening statements from Brown and Sununu before we got on today, and I was just struck with Scott Brown. I know he's trying to make lemonade out of lemons, but when you're confronted with the fact that no one in your party basically is endorsing you, both here in New Hampshire, as John Sununu pointed out, and then, of course, the biggest endorser of all, Donald Trump. And then you turn around and say, well, that's actually a positive for me because I'm the independent. And again, I'm just a professor, right? But my understanding is that you don't win your party's primaries by pointing out that first and foremost that you're an independent who doesn't need the support of all of these endorsements and so forth. The endorsements send a signal, especially when they're a unified signal from top to bottom. And so for Brown, I mean, if that's the best he can do, right? I mean, that's if he's got those 2 minutes and those are his 2 minutes, people are going to be in the same boat, right? They come out from that and say, yeah, I like Scott Brown. He's kind of funny. He'd be perfectly okay as a candidate if we didn't have Sununu, but we do. And I didn't hear an argument for, setting aside Sununu.
Mm-hmm. McGee, what do you hear now from normal Republicans when they're talking about this race away from reporters?
I didn't believe that a lot of people thought it was Chris Sununu running until I talked to some people and they think, oh, I thought it was Chris. So,
yeah.
I've known John a long time and I think he's clearly in the driver's seat in this one. The last name is just hugely helpful. And, Scott had that AI graphic with them, two of them in a boxing match this week. And well, Scott got him in the ring and I don't know. It seemed like he whiffed. There wasn't a lot. He's got like the professor said, he's got no ammo. He's got nothing. He's got nothing really to take Sununu to town on. And so you get this. Well, he's a nice guy, but he's not. He doesn't have the dough. He doesn't have the last name. He doesn't have the Trump endorsement. What's the sell, right? I mean,
the best moment of the debate. The best moment of the debate was when the moderator was doing the coin toss. And
I don't know if anybody caught this piece of mail, but Brown's out with another piece whacking.
I haven't seen that yet.
Whacking Sununu, and I would have thought he'd be all over that messaging at the debate, but he kept it pretty civil. And to Sununu's credit, he hasn't thrown any fastballs at Scott. He doesn't have to. But I would have thought by now he might have been tempted to talk about that where's Sullivan County gaffe that Brown had in his first U.S. Senate race against Shaheen up here.
I think if he does anything about Scott Brown
is right that he's just too much of a normal.
He's a nice guy
when he's for Brown. I mean, for Brown, you might as well be getting up on the mound and throwing all sorts of weird stuff, and try to out Trump. I mean, that's you're seeing Trump's endorsement doesn't quite mean what it used to, right? We're seeing that evidence in South Carolina, Iowa. We might see it in Louisiana this weekend. But for Brown, you got to try all sorts of stuff to say, to try to say as Trump starts to fade into the sunset, there's going to be this kind of splintering, perhaps, of the MAGA movement. And you just got to try some weird stuff if you're Brown. But I just don't think he's got that in him.
No, and he's still helping his friends. I know he's got a couple of gigs in Massachusetts with the band coming up next week. I've seen him come across my screen, and
sure.
So yeah, I like Scott. I really do. I know he's been offered a number of positions by the Trump team to try to get out of the way, but he's in it to the end, and I wish him well, but I just don't see any chance of him.
And he's having a good time. He was at that debate. He was having a good time. He's wailing away. The only thing at the debate the funny moment was, Chris, you won the toss. Oops, Johnny. The only thing that will linger from the debate was when he took a gratuitous swipe at Governor Kelly Ayotte over vetoing the bathroom bill. That did not play well in Ayotte's office, and he does not need to pick any more fights with any more Republicans. Let's get back to the Democrats and the push on the issue of healthcare and single payer, because the question is, in 2026, in the past, you remember, Republicans love jumping on they want to end all private insurance. If you like your doctor, gone. If you like your insurance coverage from work, gone. They're going to put you all on the government thing. And that was a problem, which is why Obamacare ended up being the weird thing it was. They couldn't get past that. It's why Democrats ran against the single payer issue, why Bernie scared them in the past. I got to tell you, Chuck McGee, I'm hearing more and more Democrats in New Hampshire going, yes, single payer, government health care, let's do it, baby. And Stephanie Shaheen may be playing it too cute by half by avoiding that issue and not embracing it the way most of her opponents have.
Are you suggesting that Stephanie Shaheen doesn't know what she believes in or where she stands on the issues? It seems to be pretty clear.
All I can say is I don't know what she believes in, and I don't know where she stands on the issues. That's all I can confirm.
Listen, if you love rationing, if you want to wait 6 or 8 months to get into a doctor's office, and you think ballooning it with more administrators and raising the costs is the right path for you, then God bless you. But it's just not if you want to enjoy the medicine that we have today. I mean, this debate we've had for years about the cost of medicines in America being more than they are in Europe. I don't want to pay any more money than anybody else, but somebody's going to pay for the R&D. I mean, they're not going to pay from the R&D from the people of Sierra Leone. I mean, it's got to get paid for somehow, and medicine's expensive, but getting the government, they've screwed up healthcare, they've screwed up energy costs, they've screwed up everything they touch, they screw up. And so I just don't see the reality of having government run healthcare.
But Professor Scala, my question is, do you agree with me that not long ago, you did not want to be a Democrat running on single payer healthcare and ending all private healthcare? And now there are plenty of Democrats who are embracing that position. And it may be that they're missing, the ones who are holding back, like Stephanie Shaheen, are missing their own party's train.
I mean, there's definitely a move, a division we're seeing in New Hampshire's first district between, moderately liberal candidates and more progressive ones. That's the sort of thing that's going to get hashed out a bit, maybe in the primary, but in the general election, I mean, I think in 26, all of that's going to be under the radar compared to things like affordability, inflation, the management of the economy, et cetera. And mostly it's going to be a referendum, as it usually is, on the party in power.
Exactly.
Where all the chickens come home to roost is in 2028. When the mayor of the city of New York is here in New Hampshire with AOC or Ro Khanna, and there starts to be a debate in 28 about what Democrats are for. That's going to be very interesting. It'll be interesting on the Republican side too, as we see, Trump kind of sail into the sunset, and we see whether Vance or Rubio can really succeed him. But Democrats, that's going to be a fight, I think, for another day. But no question, if you think about, Speaker Jeffries in 2027, I mean, there's a good argument to be made that the left's version of the Freedom Caucus is starting to emerge. Sure. And if Democrats take the House narrowly, why isn't Jeffries going to have the same problem that Mike Johnson has now with his right wing?
So, by the way, Donald Trump is not going to sail into the sunset. It's going to be fight against the dying of the light. He will not go gently at all. He's going to be flailing, holding on. He's going to be reviving the rumor that he might run for a third term. It's going to be all craziness. If you had to bet money right now, Chuck McGee, who are the Republican and Democratic nominees for president going to be in 2028? And Scala, you're next. So hang on. Chuck McGee, who are your bets right now?
Presidents, nominee Vance and Newsom.
Dante, Scala? I would agree on Vance. I don't agree on Newsom. I think Newsom may have peaked already, to be honest. I think we look somewhere else, maybe for, again, it could be there's an opening among, progressives, right? There's going to be that lane. And there are going to be a lot of candidates who are in the middle of the Democratic Party, the center-left candidates and so forth. But there's going to be a left wing, that's a left lane, so to speak, that's open. Right. And whether it's AOC or whether she waits for take on Schumer, or whether it's Ro Khanna, as my colleague Henry Olson over at the Washington Post pointed out a few weeks ago, there's going to be that opening there. So Democrats are going to have, I don't think it's going to be Newsom. I don't know who it's going to be, but don't count out the left as a real possibility that's going to cause a lot of headaches in what could be a really fascinating primary to watch.
I think, Michael, if I could, please, I think one of the things that's going to come out of these elections in New York City last week, which people haven't thought through, is that the DNC has not yet set the calendar for the 28 primary. And I think they're going to cut these progressives off at the knees by starting in South Carolina, where there's a large African-American population. And I think they're going to, unfortunately, pickle New Hampshire as a way to do that. I think they're going to kneecap these progressives. I don't think they're going to let them get a head start. Maybe I'm wrong on Newsom, but I don't see it being as this wild Bernie AOC Mandami wing rising to the top through the traditional map.
This past week, in the wake of those New York elections, our own Maggie Goodlander, hardly a bomb thrower who sticks her neck out, joined a group of non-progressive House Democrats who are starting a basically don't let these crazies take over our party caucus. And she's a founding member. And I agree with you, Chuck. They are going to fight. And it makes sense that if you want to keep Bernie Sanders candidates from winning primaries, you don't start in New Hampshire. My question is, I have a very smart guy who covers politics. He tells me he thinks Bernie's going to run. That, you know, Bernie's in good shape and he doesn't come, you know, he doesn't have the Biden.
Why not? Why not? Another
why
lake
not?
house. Everybody could use another lake house. I mean, you know, follow the key.
My point is, I don't see how they stop. They had to cheat in 2016 to keep Bernie from winning the nomination. The Democrats literally screwed.
So they start in South Carolina. You got 3 progressives, and they all split the vote against the more traditional Democrat.
What do you think, Professor?
I think it's certainly possible. I think that the Democrats keep South Carolina first. The question will be, you know, New Hampshire is going to vote what it's going to vote, regardless of what they say. Will there be any sort of sanctions with teeth, right? Because it really all depends on candidates showing up. If candidates show up, there'll be a New Hampshire primary like we know it. And if they're showing up without fear of retribution from their party, then in some sense, it doesn't matter who, you know, whether they're sanctioned to go first or not, because the delegates don't matter much. And they always figure that stuff out at the end in the back end accounting in April, May, and June. But I think you've got to think about candidates who, you know, can find a way, and again, easier said than done, to transcend those kind of rigid ideological, you know, categories. You know, like Obama was able to do back in 2008. I mean, Obama in some ways was a more moderate candidate than Hillary Clinton back in 2008, right? And yet he was able to succeed in building this coalition of voters that made ideology matter less. And I think that's how Democrats need to be thinking about 2028. You know, J.D. Vance gets handed this, you know, if I'm Marco Rubio and I'm saying, hey, J.D., you're welcome to drink from that chalice of 2028 and everything that goes with it. But if you're on the Democratic side, I do think you have to offer more than just pointing at Donald Trump and saying, you know, bad, terrible, awful. You have to be like Obama and offer some kind of hopeful vision for what's coming. That, again, that transcends the ideological splits that are true of every party, Republican or Democratic. It's just I think it's a little more apparent right now on the Democratic side than it is on the Republican side, but they're there.
Chuck McGee, the American people have only given a president a third term with another candidate. I would argue once, George H.W. Bush. You could argue that Truman, but you know, FDR died in office, and so it's more complicated. So not very often in the past 125 years has a party gotten a third turn. With Trump's approval in 30%, what are the odds that any Republican is going to win in 2028 for president?
Certainly seems like a stretch at the moment. I think it'll all depend, as James Carville once said, the economy's stupid. It's all going to boil down to pocketbooks. I think the American people are very stretched. I think their credit cards are maxed out. I think people are a little fearful, a little stressed. And if their pocketbooks are feeling better, I think they'll be feeling better. And I think there's a good chance because they don't want another 30 million invaders coming into our country and raising healthcare costs and raising housing costs and breaking our laws. So I think that issue is still a viable one to play for voters.
Well, what's viable for me is having you guys on to talk about what's going on. Dante Scala, University of New Hampshire Journal. It should be the University of New Hampshire Journal. Now that we're big prize winners after the big press association, I'm kind of taking.
I can see a new sponsor in your future. Yes,
absolutely. But Dante, thanks so much. Chuck McGee, keep up the great work. We appreciate you being on the New Hampshire Journal podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.